Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here at 3:25 when Disneyland and all of the fun activities are right around the corner. So I think it's just me and a few people standing between you and your weekend. So we'll try and make this really fun. And I'm looking forward to sharing some new content with you, hopefully, about the value of the U.S. Hispanic market, the opportunity there is for leaning into this community as donors and supporters, and hopefully just giving you a sort of a base and a background about what's happening in the community today. So my name is Stacie de Armas. I work at Nielsen. Many of you obviously have heard of Nielsen. Nielsen is television, radio ratings, but we're a lot more than that. We measure consumer behavior. We measure what people purchase and attitudes and how they feel about all sorts of different things. And I had the wonderful opportunity through our partners at Kerux to be invited here to share some background with you on this community and the opportunity that it presents to your organization. So we'll get started. So these are some of the things I aim to answer for you today. How you can be authentic and what messaging you should be using and how you're going to get attention. I'm going to do this by pulling together all of that data that I shared with you into a bit of a storyline about the Hispanic community. We're going to give you some background and some facts, some things you could probably Google, but some things that I think are important as we're building this storyline. And share with you, hopefully at the end, you'll have a few answers to these. But of course, you're going to need a strategic partner to activate that. And there are a number of experts in the field, and I definitely suggest that you reach out to learn more about that. Each year at Nielsen, I engage upon a report about the community. Several years ago, we did one on the Latina and understanding her power in her community and her influence. This year, we did one specifically on Latinos and their how they engage with digital and technology. So first, I want to kind of open by sharing with you, what it means to be Hispanic in the United States has changed a lot, specifically recently, but it certainly has changed a lot even just in the past, 30 and 40 years. The definition of culture and community have changed. And, it's much more than being of Hispanic origin, and it's more than food, and it's more than music. It's culture, and it's art and lifestyle, and it's a set of psychosocial behaviors that are really unique to the Latino community. Lately, I'm sure you've noticed within your own ministries and just, in the community, your exposure to Latin culture and Latin content has increased, almost regardless of where you live, right? If you, want to or not, you may have been exposed to Latin music or other piece of cultural content. And so really that tells us that their influence over mainstream culture and their personal demand for cultural experiences has definitely increased. So, to talk just a bit about the market, the title, by the way, is the 3 C's. I'll tell you what they are right now, and then we're going to go through them. They're community, culture, and content, okay? Those are the things that are going to help you win, and we're going to tie into each of those. Just by way of background, the Hispanic community, so it's 18% of the population of the United States, but it represented, between 2016 and 17, 51% of the total population growth of the country, from just 18% of the population, right? More than half of the population growth contribution came from this community. Now, there are a few reasons that is a lot. It's not immigration anymore. Maybe, a decade ago. It actually has more from births, from U.S.-based births. So Latinos are disproportionately younger, more in childbearing years, so also very family-oriented, so we see these families growing earlier. By way of also background, 64% of Hispanics in the U.S. are Mexican, but only a third are foreign-born. And, the community continues to grow regionally based on your personal experience. I'm sure that you'll know that in some markets you have more Mexicans, in other markets you might have more Cubans or South Americans or Puerto Ricans. And so this is a really important cultural nuance when you're messaging, developing programs and services to reach the community that feel authentic. So as I started this piece of research, one thing we always want to base it on when we want to really understand the community is to understand, all the basic demographics, right? Sort of the age. And these are all things that are really relevant to what you're doing when you're trying to, of course, develop programs and messages to the group. By way of comparison, the non-Hispanic white community in the United States has a median age of 43. So that's our median. If we're going to revert to back to school, right? We have mean, median, and mode. And median is when you line everyone up from youngest to oldest, right in the center. This is your non-Hispanic white median age in the United States. But for the Hispanic community, it's just 28. Right? That's the median age. So that kind of gives you perspective how much younger. This is where the majority of the people are going to fall, this median group. 28 is definitely a different life stage than 43. Right? This is the majority of the community that you're going to be serving. Other comparison, for Asian, it's 36, and for African American, it's 33. But, this 28 really is a guiding, it's something we should use to guide how we understand this cohort of Hispanics. So I wanted to take a closer look at that age distribution. This is important because this is for nationally, but it's also going to be reflective in your communities. What you're looking at here on the right is going to be non-Hispanic white. Let's see if we can get that to come up. There it is. Here's your non-Hispanic white distribution of Generation Z and millennials. There it is. So you have 19% of non-Hispanic whites that fall in Gen Z. That's under 18. Those are your younger group. You have 20% for non-Hispanic white that are millennials, under 34, but, with a few years, it's actually under 37, but we'll kind of round that out. This is, in comparison, what your Hispanic community looks like in the U.S. You have 60% that are 34 or under, and a full third of the whole population in the U.S. is under the age of 18. These are the kids that need programs, services, support, and all of the wonderful things that you can offer them, and that you can also work with your clients to ensure that they offer. You have a full, 60% that are under the age of 34. This is the rest of the distribution for you, for non-Hispanic, white, and Hispanic. The reason I'm really driving home this home piece is because it really needs to guide how you think about everything that you do. Specifically, I was having a dialogue with my friends at Gerux about things like men's groups. And how, when you have the majority of the population this young, and, fatherhood looks different in the Hispanic community. They typically tend to be a lot younger. And actually, I don't want to get ahead of myself because there's an important slide I want to talk about. But fatherhood, because it comes at different stages, oftentimes what is important, the issues, overall, everyone has, shared faith. But overall, there are issues, challenges, and different opportunities to connect with the Hispanic community. Another just kind of fun stat I'd like to share with you is that for white Americans, the most common age, which is mode, if anyone right, median mode, it means the most common, basically. The most common age for white Americans in 2015 was 55. So your median age, 43. Your most common, more people falling into that group, is 55. For Hispanics, the most common age was 8. Yes, so there is more people, there are more Hispanics aged 8 than in any other age group. Very young community. But as a percentage of the overall Hispanic population, this younger group is so predominant that they're really driving culture and decisions within the U.S. in a way that their non-ethnic counterparts aren't. So, overview on households. One of the fascinating things, and again, you can grab this data from census, but one of my favorite points on this slide is this 27, because as it compares to 16. What that tells me is that 27% of Hispanic households are multi-generational, right? So more than any other group, actually, where you have abuelita, you have your older generation of Hispanic living with your younger generation, influencing culture, also keeping language alive. One of the questions we always get is, well, if we only have a third of Latinos that are foreign-born now, how is language and culture staying alive? I mean, you would imagine over time it just kind of wouldn't, but it is. One of the main reasons is this 27%, major contributors to culture in the household. The other is content, right? Content you can access now more easily than you ever could, content in language, content in culture. And we know from sociology work that culture is identity affirming. So Latinos are seeking content in language and in culture because it reaffirms who they are. And that feels authentic, right? And that's the opportunity, I think, for many of you within your ministries, is not just to have something perfectly or beautifully translated. I mean, it's not just about a beautiful translation or the right faces. It's about the nuance of it meaning something and feeling right and feeling authentic. Latinos increasingly now are bilingual. You have 73% of Latinos that are bilingual, yet accessing content in language more than they ever have in the past. One, because it's readily available, right? We could all on our phone right now access any content we want from anywhere. That's part of it. But the other part is, again, it's identity affirming to do so. So Latinos are leaning into content and language because they want to, not because they have to. That's the difference between something that's authentic and just maybe serving the community. So this is a slide that I actually generally show when I talk to brands. I do a lot of dialogue with brands and at other big conferences and events, sort of just talking about an overview of the market. And I was sharing this with my friends at Kerrux, talking about whether I thought this would work for you. And I think we decided it would, because while it is specifically about brands and consumer expenditures, it has a bit of a bigger story. So for non-Hispanic white, and that's what this purple represents, this is sort of the life cycle expenditure curve. What that means is this is when you have sort of the acquisition years, right? Making money in the community. And it goes sort of like this. You have your education acquisition first, then you buy your house, then you have your children. There's sort of a bit of a path for non-Hispanic white. And that's what it usually looks like. What you're looking at across the bottom, 0 to 99, are the years, right, how old someone is. So you can see in age when people are acquiring and spending more money and when they're kind of not, right? Makes sense. For the Hispanic community, it looks a little bit different. A lot of that acquisition and spending comes a little bit later. And so do some of these life elements. Sometimes children come first, then education, then home buying. But what is really interesting here is sort of the spend. When you see Latinos having the majority of sort of their income and expenditures, and also over here at the edge, how they have some available income and expenditures when your non-Hispanic white don't. Does anybody know why that might be? Their kids are out of the home earlier, right? Their kids are out of the home earlier, some of those expenses are gone earlier, where your non-Hispanic whites still have kids in college when they're in their 50s and 60s, and you don't have that very often in the Hispanic community, or you're less likely to. So their disposable income comes up. Now, one of the interesting things I found that correlated with that, when I looked at giving among the Hispanic community, they over-index for giving at 50 plus as compared to non-Hispanic white as a percentage of the community, not amount. Latinos seem to give more as they get older. Probably everybody does, but in comparison to non-Hispanic white, a lot of that has to do with the availability of disposable income. Okay, so let me take you through some of that. I do want to get to the next C first, though, which is content and devices. I want to share with you how you can use digital media to connect more. So we established that this community is younger. And of course, we imagine with youth comes the use of digital devices, right? That's what young people do. They're on their devices. So you would imagine, of course, that young people, for the most part, in particular under 18, if everyone's US born, it's going to have similar usage patterns, right? All the kids are doing a lot of the same things, spending a lot of the same time online. It's actually not what we found. We found that even within the same age groups, Latinos use digital media more than their peers and their counterparts. So we wanted to peel that back and understand why that is a little bit. And one of the most fascinating things that we found is that in real life, Latinos have a tendency, a predisposition, right, to be gregarious, to engage in dialogue, to share information, to have larger families, bigger. There's just more of this reviewing, sharing, recommending, talking, dialoguing. That's the predisposition based on culture. Well, the community's a lot younger, so a lot of those same behaviors that take place in real life that they're predisposed to, frankly, I hate to say a lot of, almost all of them, carry over and have the same life on digital media, but in a different way than their non-Hispanic white counterparts do. So that is to say that while everyone goes online to, check with friends, to connect on Facebook, to get information, Latinos do it with a different expectation. because the expectation is that it's going to mirror what their real life experience is with that, which is a leveled up experience. So let's review a little bit about this consumer and some of their technology attitudes as you're thinking about developing content and distributing content and what kind of success that may have for you with this community. Hang on a second here. There we go. 53% of Latinos told us that they use social media to keep in touch with family and friends. Probably everyone uses social media to keep in touch with family and friends. But Latinos over-index for this, meaning they're much more likely to use social. Part of that is there's extended family in other countries, and social is a great way to stay in touch. The other part of it is what I shared with you, is that there's a cultural predisposition to do so. One of the other things that we learned that I think oftentimes people think is that Latinos are sort of languish on the wrong side of the digital divide, or a little slow, to come up and be digitally connected. But we actually learned Latinos are super consumers of tech, connected to more devices for longer amounts of time, and actually rapid adopters of new technology. So this is definitely something you should be thinking about for reaching this community. We also saw this not just in younger Latinos, which the community is disproportionately younger, we saw it for older Latinos too. Remember that 27%? Culture doesn't just go this way, it comes this way too. So you have Latinos that are 50 and older compared to non-Latinos that are 50 and older. The older Latinos using technology more savvy, more digitally connected than their non-Hispanic white peers, because they're in these larger households with younger Latinos who are also pushing their items back just as much as language and culture are being pushed down. Right? So you have a much more digitally savvy older Latino. Spending a lot of time online, over 16 hours per week on apps, internet, and video. 48% more likely to spend 3 or more hours a day social networking, not because they're just bored, but because it's a way to connect with family that they're already, again, predisposed to, that feels right. Some of the fun things Latinos like to do online, you think, again, not going to be that different from what everybody else does. Your index tells you that it is different. Listen to music. Music, again, is another way to connect with culture, right? Content. I did some additional research on Spanish language religious music, traditional religious music. Latinos over-index in all of these spaces, of course, for Spanish language, but even for English language religious music as well. Music is a way people connect with what matters to them. Religion and faith are a big part of culture, so connecting with that content doesn't just have to do with personal beliefs, it has to do with being their identity. It's identity affirming to connect with content that means something to your culture. Watching video, downloading movies, listening to radio. But what's really important was what's over here in yellow. More likely to do these things than any other group. This is a great way to connect. Now, overall, the community is disproportionately younger, so we're going to see these come up. But even when I looked at it in slices among the same age groups. We've discussed that Latinos are very social. Any site or any app that really leans into visual, right? Think things like Pinterest, some of the things that aren't listed here, but Pinterest, those sorts of things that have a very visual component did very well for Latinos. Makes sense to me, right? That's a piece of culture as well, being able to be very vibrant and tapping into some of those elements. My favorite stat, Hispanics share content on social 5 times more than any other group. That has to do with this, el consejo, like the advising, and and I didn't include it here, but I'll give you guys the report link later. You definitely should download the full report if you want more. Latinos are much more likely to review, recommend, seek advice, and give advice. Part of that is because it's a cultural thing. That's what we do. You're going to hear about it. And if we don't like it, we're going to hear about it. And if we do like it, you're going to hear about it 5 times more than everybody else. We'll tell you it's facts. We will tell you what we think about the restaurant, the car guy. We'll also tell you how wonderfully connected we feel within our ministry. So I think that's really important to know that Latinos will share their experience with your brand. Okay, culture and faith, obviously interwoven. right? Faith is a huge part of Latino culture, and I think that's the opportunity here, is to really figure out how to have that dialogue and be that place and that space for Latinos that are younger, have younger families, are earlier on that climb, that acquisition climb, and looking for somewhere to be grounded, especially in the U.S. There's no secret, I think, in the past 20 months, it's been difficult for the Latino community in the U.S., right? It's been tough. They're looking for a place to lean in and to have their, some arms wrapped around them. I think it's a perfect opportunity to tap into this community. A little bit about culture. We learned about the importance of cultural influence and connection when we did this piece of research. It just cannot be understated. The power of cultural norms and tradition, like physical connectivity, sharing, and communal support, are so deeply rooted throughout the life experiences of Latinx and Latinos in general that they seek similar, highly engaged experiences in their everyday interactions. Who they are, they seek that in every engagement and interaction they have. It's not compartmentalized. So tech, it can really be a conduit to culture. And this community is predisposed to those connections both on and offline. 3/4 of this community told us that their cultural heritage is very, very important to them. I haven't seen this number change at all, and I've been looking at this research, this specific piece of research, for 12 years. I haven't seen it change at all. You'd think, again, over time, you'd kind of see a bit of a drop. I mean, even I would think that, right, as a researcher. Over time, you're going to see a bit of a drop-off, but that's not what we've seen. Latinos consistently lean in, and actually, I've seen this number move up. But part of that is because of the availability of culturally connecting content. Right? It's easier now, easier than it ever has been, to connect with whatever is identity affirming to you. This is the opportunity, I think, for this particular group within the Hispanic community. Another 39% told us that they're more connected to their culture than their parents are. More than their parents. That's kind of a remarkable stat if you think about it, right? I mean, my dad was born in Cuba and lived there till he was 15. So I think I'm more connected to culture than my dad, to the Cuban culture? Maybe I'd say yes to that. I do a lot more research. I've been to Cuba. I went last summer. I don't know. It's also very easy for me to stay connected and to share content and ideas and thoughts with my son about our culture. So to kind of recap, we talked about Latinos using digital connections as an extension of their real lives. There's certainly an opportunity there. We've talked about how Latinos are predisposed to having these elevated sort of expectations out of engagements with technology, and that this behavioral expectation is not just with one another, but it's with brands, it's with organizations, it's... Sorry about that. I want to go back to that one. It's with brands, with organizations, and they're seeking a cultural connection. Okay, I grabbed some research on. Did I go back to that one? Well, here you have it. I grabbed some research on faith, just a few things, but some things I think are really interesting. 67% of Latinos told us that they consider themselves a religious person. Now, remember, this community is a lot younger, so sometimes faith, depending on the home, faith can come at different stages. This was a remarkable number, I thought. Also, another 56% told us that religion should be the pillar of our society. 48% telling us that they agree they attend religious services regularly. By the way, that's 13% higher than the total market. It's going to be different based on parts of the country, regions, but this is overall U.S. And another 69% told us that they agree that prayer is a part of my daily life. Nearly 70%, 11% higher than the total market, right? So this is a big part of culture. It's a part of who Latinos are. So I wanted to look at giving behaviors because I know that that's something that's important, and I think there's a big opportunity here. Let me share with you what the overall things look like now. You have, here's what giving looks like for 50 plus. I told you I saw 50 plus an increase, right? 30% of Latinos 50 plus told us they give to religious organization, 10% social welfare cause, educational causes, 6% to political causes. We're also going to see this look a little different, of course, based on disposable income, which I shared with you earlier. For Hispanics 35 to 49, This is what that looks like. Still a nice number for those that give to religious causes. And then this is what your total overall, this is everybody rolled up together, right? 29 rolled up together. It looks different by age break. So this is the opportunity that's on the table, right? Right now that money is sort of distributed. Different causes. Educational is important. As you would imagine, even for 3549, you see that number is higher there, and it's even higher when I look at different splits. Actually, 18 to 24 was pretty high too. Makes sense. Latinos have families oftentimes a bit younger. But what I thought is, this opportunity compounds, and there's very little competition out there. So what if we could bring all of that giving together sort of under one umbrella, right? Your organization, what you're offering the community so that money isn't kind of spread out. This is the opportunity. Well, actually, if 29% is already being given, you still have another, right? Was that what I said? Was it 29 or 28? I pop back to that one. 29. So you get to see my animation again. Lucky, see, it's Friday. It's a happy day. So you've got about 19%, right, that's being distributed elsewhere. The opportunity to bring that based on the educational programs you offer, the home, the cultural connection they feel that they have, the authenticity of their dialogue with your ministry. There's an opportunity here. It's blue ocean. In particular with educational programs. I think for youth, I think that's definitely going to be the way to the heart of the Latino community. Authenticity is really, really important. I'm bringing you one more piece of research, a few stats based on something I usually present with brands, but I think it's important because I want to drive home the point of authenticity. Again, not just doing something in language, but it's got to be in culture. It's got to feel right because these Latinos are speaking English, they're speaking Spanish, and they're opting in based on what they want. Maybe they're fully bilingual and English speaking in their life, but it means something culturally to them to go to church and have that, sermon be in Spanish. Maybe that's a cultural, it's identity affirming for them. So it's really important that something be authentic and you think this through and you work with an organization that can help you better plan that. So here's some of those stats for you on authenticity. This is on buying, but take these behaviors and think about them under your roof. 17% told, overall, they expect that brands communicate with a purpose, right? 17% told us they're more likely to expect that the brands that they spend money with support a social cause. This is something we hadn't seen in the Latino community 10 or so years ago. It was really more about affordability. But increasingly, people are doing sort of consumer activism. They want to align themselves with brands that mean something to them and that feel real. Another 69% told us that they would buy a product from a company they trust, even if it costs more. Trust is increasingly important in our community for all ethnic groups. The Hispanic community in particular, because of their journey recently, trust is very important, and building that can only be done through authentic dialogue. And so those are the things I have for you. I want to tell you that Latinos are increasingly looking for a space to belong. I think the opportunity on the table, again, is moving all those donor dollars in your wheelhouse based on what you're offering authentically. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions, to dialogue. At the back of the room is the Kerrux group, who have brought me in. I had some dialogue with them. I've had some dialogue with some of their partners, and thank you for the invitation and the connection to do this today. They know this market well, and they certainly can help you if you have any questions. They also, I think, have 10 gifts, right? They have 10 special gifts that are awesome. I got one, you guys. Highly recommend. Culturally relevant, beautifully put together. So if you have questions, no pressure. The first 10 people to go back there and dialogue with them get these beautiful little gifts. So please make sure you go back there and see Ivan or Andrea. And that is what I have for you today. All right? Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please ask us. We'll be back there at the table. Thank you.